After the Civil War, many Confederate veterans sought new opportunities in the American West, particularly in places like eastern Washington. Several factors contributed to this migration and their subsequent role as pioneer farmers in the region, one of them being post war hardships in the South. The South was devastated by the Civil War, both economically and socially. Many former Confederate soldiers returned home to find their farms in ruins, their families impoverished, and their communities struggling under the Reconstruction policies. The Southern economy, heavily reliant on slave labor before the war, was in crisis, and opportunities for work and land ownership were scarce. With the collapse of the plantation system and the implementation of high taxes, many Southerners, especially small farmers and former soldiers, looked westward for a fresh start. Eastern Washington offered something that the South no longer could: affordable or even free land. Under the Homestead Act of 1862, the U.S. government offered 160-acre plots to settlers who would improve and cultivate the land. Despite being enacted by the Union government during the war, Confederate veterans were still eligible to claim land under the act after hostilities ended. Additionally, railroad land grants allowed companies like the Northern Pacific Railroad to sell land at low prices to settlers, further enticing ex-Confederates seeking to rebuild their lives. Additionally, many Confederate veterans saw the Pacific Northwest as a place to escape the stigma of defeat. The South was under federal occupation during the Reconstruction times, during the years 1865 to 1877, and ex-Confederates faced political and social restrictions, including disenfranchisement and economic hardship. By moving west, they could avoid these struggles and start anew in a region largely free from direct Reconstruction policies. Eastern Washington, in particular, had a sparse population and little pre existing Unionist sentiment, making it an appealing place for those wanting to leave the war behind them and start over in their lives. Although the region appeared arid and uninhabitable to many of the early explorers, improvements in dryland farming techniques made it a viable place for agriculture. Confederate veterans, many of whom had farming experience from the South, found that crops like wheat could thrive in the rolling hills of eastern Washington. The area's fertile soil, combined with these innovative dryland farming methods, allowed them to establish productive farms. The Northern Pacific Railroad, completed in the 1880s, played a crucial role in drawing settlers, including Confederate veterans, to eastern Washington. Railroads not only provided transportation for migrants, but also made it possible for farmers to send their wheat and other crops to market. Towns like Walla Walla, Spokane, and Colfax grew rapidly, offering economic opportunities beyond just farming. Confederate veterans who had mechanical skills, blacksmithing experience, or a knack for business could find work in these developing communities. Migration to eastern Washington was not an isolated phenomenon, but part of a broader pattern of southern migration to the west. Many Confederate veterans moved to Texas first before heading farther north and west. The existence of southern born communities in places like Oregon, Idaho and eastern Washington created networks that encouraged even more migration. Letters from early settlers to relatives back home often describe the opportunities available, persuading even more ex Confederates to make the move. In some cases, groups of Confederate veterans established small communities that retained elements of Southern identity. While Washington was a Union state, the eastern part of the state had a mix of settlers, including many Southerners who were able to integrate into frontier society without facing major political obstacles. Their presence helped shape the agricultural and social landscape. In conclusion, the migration of Confederate veterans to eastern Washington was driven by a combination of economic desperation, land availability, agricultural potential, and the desire for a fresh start away from Reconstruction era tensions. Their farming expertise, combined with the region's fertile soil and expanding transportation networks, made them successful pioneer farmers. Over time, their influence contributed to the growth of eastern Washington's agricultural industry and shaped the region's cultural and economic development in the late 19th century.